Alright guys, so today we're going to do another TryHackMe lab. We're going to be working on Active Directory basics. So let's get started. We're going to start with task 1. And task 1 is just going to give us a brief overview of Active Directory. Active Directory is the directory service for Windows Domain Network. It is used by many of today's top companies and is a vital skill to comprehend when attacking Windows. So what is Active Directory? Active Directory is a collection of machines and servers connected inside of domains that are a collective part of a bigger forest of domains that make up the Active Directory network. So today we're going to go over Active Directory and also Active Directory components such as domain controllers, forests, trees, domains, users and groups, trusts, policies, domain service. So to summarize Active Directory is a collection of machines and servers that can be used to centralize usernames, passwords, and other network resources such as computers, printers, file shares, and etc. Once you understand what is Active Directory, click Run Complete. For task 2, we're going to learn about the physical Active Directory. So the physical Active Directory is the server and machine on premise. These can be anything from domain controllers and storage server to domain user machines, everything needed for an Active Directory environment besides the software. So we're going to start off by learning about the domain controller. So a domain controller is basically what holds the Active Directory domain service data stored. It handles authentication and authorization services. It replicates updates from other domain controllers, and it also allows admin access to manage domain resources. This right here kind of sums up what domain controller really is. So the domain controller is, for example, let's say if I update password restriction, that update will be replicated to all of the other controllers. So now let's look at ADDS data store. So remember, this is the Active Directory data store, which holds the database and processes needed to store and manage directory information such as users, groups, and servers. So below is an outline of some of the contents and characteristics of the ADDS data store. So it contains the ntds.dit, which is a database that contains all of the information of an Active Directory domain controller, as well as password hashes for domain user. So this ntds.dit, this is very valuable. Every hacker would love to get a database that contains all of the password hashes. So this is a really important database. So the ADDS data store stored by default in the system root ntds, and it's accessible only by the domain controller. Alright, so let's answer the questions. What database does the ADDS contain? Let's go back up. Database. It contains the ntds.dit. So just going to copy and paste that. Where is the ntds.dit stored? It's going to be stored in the system root. What type of machine can be a domain controller? It should be Windows right here. Windows Server. Once you complete task 2, go to task 3. We're going to talk about the forest. The forest is what defines everything. It is the container that holds all of the other bits and pieces of the network together. Without the forest, all of the other trees and domain would not be able to interact. It is only a way of describing the connection created between the trees and domain. So a forest is a collection of one or more domain trees inside of an Active Directory network. It is what categorizes the parts of the network as a whole. The forest consists of these parts, which we'll go into further details with later. Trees, a hierarchy of domains in Active Directory domain service. Domains used to group and manage objects. Organization units, OU, containers for groups, computers, users, printers, and other OUs. Trusts allow users to access resources in other domains, objects, users, groups, printers, computers, shares, domain service, DNS servers, LLM, NR, IPv6, and domain schema, rules for objects creation. So let's answer the questions. What is the term for a hierarchy of domains in a network? That's going to be trees. So let's type in that. Okay, there we go, tree without the S. What is the term for the rules for object creation? Domain schema. What is the term for containers, for groups, computers, users, printers, and other OUs? That's going to be organization units. Let's copy that, paste it here. Now we're going to go to task 4, users and groups. So the users and groups that are inside of an Active Directory are up to you. When you create a domain controller, it comes with default groups and 2 default users, administrators and guests. It is up to you to create new users and create new groups to add users to. Users are the core to Active Directory. Without users, why have Active Directory in the first place? There are 4 main types for users. We have the domain admin, which is the boss, that they control the domains and are the only ones with access to the domain controller. Next, we have the server account. These are for the most part never used except for service maintenance. They are required by Windows for service such as SQL to pair a service with a service account. Next, we have the local administrator. These users can make changes to local machines as an administrator and may even be able to control other normal users, but they cannot access the domain controller. Okay, so it's like a local admin. They have some rights, some privilege, but they don't have access to the domain controller, which makes sense. Next, we have the domain users. These are your everyday users. They can log in on the machines. They have the authorization to access and may have local administrator rights to machines depending on the organization. This overview right here would be great for anyone who want to learn the concept of least privilege. This would give you an example of how to create permissions based off of users. And of course, we can do it based off of groups too. So let's get into the group overview. Groups make it easier to give permissions to users and objects by organizing them into groups with specific permissions. There are 2 overarching types of Active Directory groups: security groups and distribution groups. Security groups, these groups are used to specify permissions for a large number of users. Distribution group, these groups are used to specify email distribution lists. As an attacker, these groups are less beneficial to us, but can still be beneficial in enumeration. And then we have the default security groups. So these are the different type of default security groups. So we're not going to go over this now, but you can read this on your own if you want to, since they all are very important. But let's answer the question, which type of group specify users' permissions? That's going to be security group. We're going to copy and paste security group. All workstation and servers joined to the domain. That's going to be domain controller. Let's copy that and paste it here. Which group can publish certificates to the directory? That should be certificates, I think. Search publisher. I'm going to copy this and paste that. Which user can make changes to a local machine but not to a domain controller? Local machine, that should be local administrator. Copy this. Paste that. Which group have their password replicated to read-only domain controllers? Allow RODC password replication group. We're going to copy this and paste that. Now for task 5, trust and policies. So trust and policies go hand in hand to help the domain and trees communicate with each other and maintain security inside of the network. They put the rules in place of how the domain inside of a forest can interact with each other, how an external forest can interact with the forest, and the overall domain rules or policy that a domain must follow. So there are 2 types of trust that determine how the domain communicates. So the directional is defined as the direction of the trust flows from a trusting domain to a trust domain. Now the transitive is defined as the trust relationship expands beyond just 2 domains to include other trust domains. Policies are a very big part of Active Directory. They dictate how the server operates and what rules it will and will not follow. You can think of domain policies like domain groups, except instead of permissions, they contain rules, and instead of only applying to a group of users, the policy applies to a domain as a whole. They simply act as a rulebook for active directories that a domain admin can modify and alter as they deem necessary to keep the network running smoothly and securely. So here are some of the policies that are default or you can create in the Active Directory environment. Disable window defenders. This would disable window defenders across all machines on the domains. Digital sign communication always. Can disable or enable SMB signing on the domain controller. So what type of trust flows from a trusting domain to a trusted domain? A trust flow that flows from one to the other is going to be the directional. What type of trust expands to include other trust domains? This is going to be your transitive. So let's copy that and paste that. Now let's start working on task 6. So now we're going to talk about the Active Directory Domain Service and Authentication. The Active Directory Domain Service are the core functions of an Active Directory network. They allow for management of the domain, security certificates, LDAP, and much more. This is how the domain controller decides what it wants to do and what services it wants to provide for the domains. So domain service overview. Domain services are exactly what they sound like. They are services that the domain controller provides to the rest of the domains and trees. Okay, so here's some of the services. We have LDAP, certificate services, and then DNS, LLNR, NBT, NS. Now, domain authentication overview. The most important part of Active Directory, as well as the most vulnerable part of Active Directory, is the authentication protocol set in place. There are 2 main types of authentications in place for Active Directory: Kerberos and NTLM. So for Kerberos, this is the default authentication service for Active Directory, and it uses the ticket, granted ticket, and service tickets to authenticate users and give users access to other resources across the domain. So this is the default authentication service for Active Directories, using ticket, granted tickets, and service tickets to authenticate users and give users access to other resources across the domain. NTLM is the default window authentication protocol used as encrypted challenge response protocol. Now let's answer the questions. What type of authentication use tickets? It's going to be Kerberos. And what domain service can create, validate, and revoke published key certificates? That's going to be your certificate service. Now let's go to task 7. So now we're going to look over the AD in the cloud. So recently there has been a shift in Active Directory pushing the company to cloud network for their companies. The most notable AD cloud provider is Azure AD. Its default settings are much more secure than an on-premise physical Active Directory network. However, the cloud AD may still have vulnerabilities in it. So this is the overview of the AD. So Azure acts as the middleman between your physical Active Directory and your user sign-on. This allows for a more secure transaction between domains, making a lot of Active Directory attacks ineffective. So your Azure AD is in the cloud and it's in the middle. So now we have our cloud security overview. So to just give you a comparison of the difference between Windows Server Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. So we're not going to read all of this. You can read that on your own time. But let's answer the questions. What is the Azure AD equivalent of LDAP? It's going to be REST APIs. What is the Azure AD equivalent of domains and forests? Tenant. Copy. I'm going to copy that and paste that here. What is the Windows Server AD equivalent of guest? It's going to be trust. I'm going to copy that and paste that here. So let's move on to task 8. So now we're going to start a lab. So we're going to click on Start Machine. Now I'm just going to wait until I get the IP address so I can use my Kali virtual machine. Alright, so now I got my IP address. I'm going to click on copy, and now we're going to add this to our VM. We're going to click on terminal. We're going to look for PowerShell, click on that. Okay, so I'm going to type in SSH administrator at 10.227.132. There we go. Yes, type in yes. Now we need to add in a password from TryHackMe. So let me go back. The password is going to be 123. Alright, so now we're into our PowerShell. So let's go back to TryHackMe. Alright, so now I need to navigate to the directory Power View. So I need to do CD download, then I need to do PowerShell EP bypass. Alright, so let's type this stuff in on our VM. CD download. So we're going to change directory to download. And now I'm going to type in PowerShell -EP bypass, and now dot space dot backslash PowerView dot PS1. Everything should be correct. So now let's go back to TryHackMe and read the question. Once the machine is deployed, just click on complete. What is the name of the Windows 10 operating system? We're gonna copy this. We're gonna copy this command and paste this in our VM. Alright, so let's click on enter. So it's gonna be Windows 10 Enterprise Evaluation. So let's copy this. Now we're gonna paste this to TryHackMe. Paste that. What is the second admin name? So we're gonna, I think we're gonna type in to get the admin. So let's copy this command and paste this command in our VM. Let's paste. The second admin name would be admin2. So we're going to copy this and paste that here. Which group has a capital V in the group name? Click on hint. It's going to give you a hint. So we're going to just click on get net group, copy that, and we're going to paste that. So I found Hyper-V administrator. We're going to copy that. Now we're going to paste that here. When was the password last set for the SQL Server user? Let's click on the hint. And we're going to copy. Let's copy this. Let's try this. Get net user -spn and see what pop up. Let's click on that. When I type that in, we're going to see password last set, and that's going to be 5/13/2020 8/26. We're going to copy this entire thing, and then we're going to paste that here. Now for task 9 conclusion. We have covered all of the basics of Active Directory that you need to know to understand how it interacts inside of the network. We also got hands-on with Active Directory to see the insides of a domain controller and how it functions. Now that you know the basics, go and find the vulnerabilities inside of these networks and see what makes Active Directory such a big deal to the cyber community. Now we're just going to click on complete, and we're done, guys. So congratulations on making it this far.